Ladies and gentlemen, and thank you all for joining us for this morning's webinar, which is how can technology help you grow your business? By way of a quick introduction, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Mark Rubinson, and I'm a partner of ABG. Most of you hopefully will know about us, but if you don't, we're a mid-sized firm of chartered accountants offering all kinds of chartered accountancy type services, including audit, payroll, outsourced accounting, tax, both personal and corporate, VAT, probate, and lots of other stuff that you would expect a medium-sized firm of chartered accountants to offer. It's a shame we're having to do this in this way, but it's the new normal, and I think webinars will last for a long, long time, even when you can go back to your offices. This is our second one for this year, and the next one is on the 5th of March, when our tax partner, Victor Dorp, will go through the highlights of the much anticipated March budget. So today we're looking at how businesses can use technology to help them grow their businesses, and hopefully that will help them grow their profits. Thank you to Mark Aikman for joining us this morning. Mark's company is Ignition Transformation. He's well known to ABG, having been a client for more than 10 years. He is an internationally recognized global technology leader, specializing in delivering business transformations in complex and high-risk environments. Mark's worked in dozens of business areas on global brands, from insurance to oil and gas, margarine and chocolate. Today, Mark leads Ignition Transformation, which is a consultancy business set up to provide expert advice on digital transformation, accessible to most businesses. Now, you've been sent a link to download a set of takeaway notes, which hopefully you've worked your way through. If you haven't received the link, please email my colleague Kay Merriman, and she will put this right. Mark's going to speak for about 35 minutes, and he'll take questions through the Q&A box. If you look on your screens, and you know what you're doing, there's a Q&A bit. So if you hit Mark with a question, Mark, I guess you'll read the question out and hopefully deal with it as you're going along.
Absolutely.
Good, thank you there. We're going to close just before 10 a.m. and we're quite keen to finish on time. So if lots of questions are coming through and they haven't all been dealt with, then Mark will follow up afterwards. At the end of the webinar, there's a feedback form which will pop up, magic of technology. It should pop up anyway. And would be very great if you can complete it, because it's very important to us. And that's broadly it. Mark, over to you.
Thanks very much, Mark. And good morning, everybody. And yes, welcome to this webinar on how technology could help grow your business. Here at Ignition Transformation, we believe in clean thinking. So we won't use a lot of management and hopefully not a lot of technical jargon on this webinar today. Instead, we strip it back to kind of common sense and bare bones. Pragmatic, clean thinking is easy to grasp, and nothing fancier than that is ever needed. And even in genuinely huge business improvements. So the aim of today's session is to give you guys a way of thinking through strategic technology opportunities, giving you the right questions to ask yourself and your team, and ways to maximize technology, but also ensure that you invest well. As Mark said, we'll take questions via the Q&A box in the second half of the webinar. The first thing you need to do is identify where growth lies, effectively your strategy. And I know it's very tempting to, but never start with what's failing, broken, or out of date. Instead, start with your overriding requirement for success. Therefore, the first step is to identify which is your primary opportunity for growth. It will be different, of course, for each business, depending on where you are in your business life cycle, and of course, which market or sector you're in. But to keep it simple, I think we can look at growth falling into three rough categories: increasing sales, better efficiencies, or merger and acquisition. And the demonstration of this slide is to show that technology can help in a multitude of ways across all of those different areas. Kay, as she said, and Mark as well, has made a handout available, which hopefully you've had a chance to download. But to build upon this concept, let's look at an expert from that. So if we look at increasing sales as an example, it could be, and these are just a selection of the things you could be looking at from a technology perspective, but gaining more customers, gaining bigger spending customers, or gaining more repeat customers. The involvement in technology to help you with all of those different requirements, and ultimately the objective increasing sales, is quite vast. So clearly, if you were to look at a technology suite across those areas, it could become very complicated and very expensive very quickly. So clearly that's not realistic. So the secret is to think carefully and just pick one opportunity for growth, the most important one, whichever that is to you. Work on it and then pick the next kind of arising priority. I'm sure ABG will be able to help you with identifying priorities like this from a financial perspective. But the key questions to kind of ask yourself are, what do we need most in order to grow? Is it cash flow, turnover, profit? If it's turnover, is it most likely to be arrived at from acquiring more market share, gaining more individual customers, or farming the customers you have? If it's profit, are we currently weakest on high costs, slow transactions, or poor processes? Answering some of the questions like these will help you whittle down your needs and wants into one lead priority. Turn your chosen priority into a clear and simple stated objective, such as we aim to grow our customer base by 5% by the end of this year compared to the same time last year. Only then are you ready to start looking into specific technology solutions. And from that statement, you now know what you need to invest in, technology which will expose your brand to more people who have not yet tried it. Implementation of technology, and I've been involved in many implementations of technology in all scale and sizes of businesses. But the critical thing to do is, once you've set that growth objective, and I can't stress how important it is to have that clear intent of what you're trying to do before you start, helping your team through this with that clear objective will help you with your growth enabling technology and IT services. Again, as part of the handout, there's a suggested route map for what I'm going to talk about now, but I'll summarize in general what I would suggest you guys look at. Picking your team. Assemble the project team and the project leader. Pick the best from the best. Depends on how big your business is, of course, but whenever I've done large scale technology programs, taking the best of the best from within the business, so within the different functions within the business, is critical. They effectively become your project team. If you can backfill them with external resource or outside resource, or their jobs can be shared amongst their existing colleagues, great. But having access to the best and the most enthusiastic and knowledgeable within your business is critical, because they effectively will become your ambassadors for change. They will help persuade the rest of their teams from all the different departments that the changes that are potentially coming and the changes that are coming in will be valid, and they will also help embed those within the departments. In terms of the agreeing the objectives, you need to really have a frank discussion with the team about your chosen priority, and ensure that everybody is on board with what it is you're trying to achieve. Typically, when you assemble the best people, they're full of great ideas, they're full of enthusiasm, and effectively the project objective can become somewhat stretched, and therefore that the temptation for the mission creep to set in happens. The critical thing to do is not curb their enthusiasm, but absolutely make sure they're crystal clear on what it is you're trying to achieve. In this case, it's in growing your customer base. Obviously, any ideas that they have can be merited and parked, for want of a better word, and can come back to once you've achieved your original objective. The next critical thing I find is undertaking discovery. So really understanding where you are now within your organization. Look across all functions within your business, from marketing, finance, operational, supply chain, logistics. The critical thing is, if, for example, we're working to that plus 5% customer target, how many do we have now? How do they behave? Where did they come from? What do they buy? And I guess what don't they buy, etc. Remember to also look outside of the organization too. So what do they buy from competitor suppliers? What global pandemics are affecting their buying patterns, etc. Look at what we have in-house to facilitate their buying. Can they browse online? Can they buy through an app, request a sample, click and collect, use PayPal, pay extra for home delivery, apply for credit, etc., etc. Whatever is relevant to your industry, of course. But once you agree what tactics will improve your sales, decisions on this will be taken by the full team, not just you or marketing or IT. Pooling that expertise gives the best informed decisions. You may have noticed that we have currently several weeks into this project, and the technology solutions have not had a look in so far. That's exactly as it should be. Technology facilitates strategy. It never dictates it. And only now, with your chosen plan of action, do you start looking for technology solutions. Never sooner, because they're always there. Some tips for when you start. Don't reinvent the wheel. It's always fastest and cheapest to go with software and services that already exist. So for example, for online payment, don't think about developing your own customized software. If you want to move into e-commerce, sign up with PayPal or SagePay. These are software programs that have been developed for many thousands of customers. They're secure and customers trust them. If you need to create loyalty programs, for example, look to things like Nectar or examples within your specific industry. Again, customers will trust solutions that they recognize and they may have used with other customers. Research what's widely used and trusted within your sector. Change the processes and the behavior to fit the standard technology. It's quicker to use new processes out of the box than changing what the firm does to fit. It's also cheaper than customizing standard processes and definitely cheaper than creating a bespoke item of software from scratch. And I've been involved in projects where I've had all manners of this. My last project was a huge margarine company, a global company, and with 4,000 staff around the world, we bought a standard set of software, which came with a standard set of processes, and we adapted the organization across the world to the processes that came with the software. Yes, there was local variances for tax purposes, depending on which country we're in, but in essence, we fit the business to standard, and that's critical because we could move at pace and we could implement what we needed to across that organization. I've also been involved in an organization where there isn't off-the-shelf standard software, so you do have to go down the bespoke or creating your own software for your own purposes. And that's absolutely possible and absolutely can be done. But the critical thing with that is knowing clearly what that objective is, as I talked about before, and being able to develop the software to meet that objective and then build upon that as you go. Otherwise, you end up spending a lot of money on software which you may not need or use. Rent, don't buy. I guess, in a very layman's term, you're probably all familiar with Microsoft Office. Microsoft Office, when I was a lad, it kind of came on floppy disks. It had about 94 of them. You got to 74 and it then gave up the ghost and you had to restart over again. And 7 hours later, you managed to get Microsoft Office installed. It then obviously moved to CD, but again, it had a relatively high upfront cost. Microsoft Office now, you can buy obviously on a monthly or yearly subscription. And we all know how quickly technology is superseded. By buying a subscription, your offer will automatically move with the times. You will not have the cost, the hassle, the downtime, and the risk of a 3-year upgrading program. Subscriptions are a genuine economy. And the critical point with this now is the barriers to entry, such as cost, may not be there anymore. So if you were looking at something like an SAP or an Oracle, these big enterprise software packages, before their cost barrier was pretty high, they are now moving, as is most of the IT industry. And that's not just in software, but also in hardware, networking. So I'm talking to a company at the moment where effectively you have no upfront cost. You don't have to buy the switches and all of the gubbins that go into your offices or factories. They actually rent them to you on a per user or per colleague basis. And you can turn them up and turn them down depending on how you go. So I think the entire IT industry is moving towards this very much OpEx-led model of subscription, which is encouraging because it gives you the flexibility to have a lot more range of services available to you, where cost possibly was a barrier before. And sometimes no new technology is needed at all, just different ways of doing things, different processes, different behaviors. Always start from the assumption that you might be able to affect the business growth you want with the technology you already have, with perhaps some process or behavioral change. In testing that premise, if it becomes apparent that technology doesn't or won't sustain the growth you need, only then do you start exploring what's for sale. And again, one of the old companies that Mark mentioned, I did a large program in there. I assumed technology was going to be the answer. It wasn't. The answer was a policy change, some process changes, an adaptation of the existing technology. And it was an efficiency drive, and that organization saved many millions of pounds by just simply looking at how they were doing things and adapting the technology. In the end, there was no need to buy new technology to facilitate what they wanted to do. Once you've chosen that technology solution, if that's what's best for you, you need to set the action plan. And for me, what's really important when you set any kind of action plan, I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about project management, not at all. But the critical thing when setting an action plan is set that deadline. I can't stress that enough. A critical deadline with measurement, governance on how you wish to measure that project is critical. A great example, surprisingly, is the COVID vaccination program, which is currently ongoing. Now, I want to kind of explode some technology myths. And I'm sure to a lot of people, IT is this black box in the corner, kind of don't go there. It's just too complicated. So let me kind of explode some myths before we go to the Q&A session. No one size fits all. A lot of technology companies will make you buy their entire suite of products, or try and tell you that their entire suite of products will be the answer to everything that you have. Trust me, in very rare occasions, that is possibly true. But in the vast majority of cases, it's always best to go for specific software and services that are best in class, that can offer you what you need. Don't be tempted to buy more and more add-ons to that software. It typically becomes, again, very expensive, and you end up not necessarily getting what you want. Because it's been invented is not a good reason. Kids in a sweet shop, or probably more apt to this audience, choosing options for your new electric car, company car, comes to mind here. Never identify an item of updated technology and then retrofit your strategy to suit its capabilities. This can happen, and I have seen it happen, where you or your team have been sold to by technology vendors or someone in the organization that believes one item of technology is now out of date. That strategic intent must always be the starting point, and you will need to be very clear on what it is you're wanting to achieve before seeking out technology. Again, I've been involved in projects where software and services have been bought and they've not had much use because that clear intent wasn't described. And again, they thought software and services was the answer. It turned out not to be the case. It can be an expensive mistake. A lot of people think IT folk are cutting edge, and technically most of them really are. But typically at the moment, most IT people are not sophisticated commercial thinkers. If you want them to help build such skills, give them personal development programs, but ultimately you need your IT people to be able to understand your business and be able to help with your business development. Hiding in the corner in a cupboard, being the IT geek is not the way forward. The other big one, and this is quite a controversial point, AI, robotics, Internet of Things, data science, the list could go on. I'm sure a lot of you have read or seen a lot of this in the press over the years. They're not quite where they have us believe. Now, I'm going to take that kind of ad lib because some of these things in some industries, they're more advanced than others. But like most things, like concept cars, a lot of people are trying out these new technologies, but in reality, not that many have made it into a tried and tested product that you can buy off the shelf. But it's an exciting part of where technology is going, and I'm absolutely convinced all of these technologies and more will play an ever increasing role in the business and businesses moving forward.